The champagne glasses clinked softly in the background as Rachel Thompson stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone, completely unaware that the heartfelt speech she was about to deliver would expose a web of lies so devastating that it would shatter not only her marriage, but also reveal the true character of everyone she thought she could trust, transforming what should have been a celebration of love into a courtroom of truth, where justice would be served in the most unexpected and satisfying way imaginable. Hi there, beautiful souls, I'm Tina, and I need you to settle in with me today because the story I'm about to share will take you through an emotional journey that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about loyalty, deception, and the incredible power of truth when it finally breaks free from the shadows where it's been hiding. Rachel's experience reveals something profound about human nature and how sometimes the people we trust most are the ones orchestrating our deepest humiliation behind closed doors. If you've ever felt like you were being laughed at while everyone else was in on a joke you didn't understand, or if you've discovered that your reality was built on someone else's lies, this story will resonate with every fiber of your being. I promise you'll want to hear every single detail of how one moment of courage changed everything forever. So please hit that like button to let me know you're here with me. And consider subscribing because I bring you real stories about real people facing life's most challenging moments. Trust me, what Rachel discovers about her husband will leave you absolutely speechless. Now, let me tell you about Rachel and how one speech at her wedding reception became the moment that changed her life forever. Rachel had been planning her wedding to Michael Williams for 2 years, carefully organizing every detail of what she believed would be the perfect celebration of their love and commitment to building a future together. As a 32-year-old nurse practitioner who had worked double shifts for months to help pay for their dream wedding, Rachel had poured her heart into creating a day that would honor their relationship and provide beautiful memories for their families and friends. The reception venue was elegant and intimate, decorated with soft lighting and floral arrangements that reflected Rachel's vision of romance and sophistication, creating an atmosphere where love and joy were supposed to flourish naturally. Rachel's relationship with Michael had always seemed solid and supportive, built on what she believed was mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection that had grown stronger over their 4 years together. Michael worked as a marketing executive for a tech startup, and his confident personality and social skills had initially attracted Rachel, who admired his ability to navigate professional and social situations with apparent ease and charm. Throughout their relationship, Michael had encouraged Rachel's career ambitions and seemed proud of her dedication to helping patients and making a difference in healthcare, often telling friends and family how lucky he felt to be with someone so compassionate and intelligent. The wedding ceremony had proceeded beautifully, with emotional vows exchanged between Rachel and Michael that brought tears to the eyes of their guests and seemed to promise a lifetime of happiness and partnership. Rachel felt overwhelmed with joy and gratitude as she looked out at the faces of everyone who had come to celebrate their union, seeing friends from nursing school, colleagues from the hospital where she worked, Michael's business associates, and beloved family members who had supported their relationship from the beginning. The photographer captured moment after moment of genuine happiness and celebration, creating what appeared to be perfect documentation of a perfect day filled with love, laughter, and hope for the future. As the reception began, Rachel noticed that several of Michael's friends and colleagues seemed unusually animated and excited, engaging in whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached, creating an undercurrent of anticipation that she initially attributed to wedding day excitement and perhaps surprise elements that Michael might have planned for the celebration. The atmosphere was festive and warm, with guests enjoying the carefully selected menu, dancing to music that held special meaning for the couple, and participating in traditional wedding activities that created a sense of community and shared joy among everyone present. The speeches began after dinner, with Rachel's father delivering a touching tribute to his daughter's strength and character, followed by Michael's best man sharing humorous stories about their friendship and expressing confidence in the couple's future happiness together. Each speech was met with applause and laughter from the guests, creating a sense of warmth and celebration that filled Rachel with pride and happiness about the community of love and support that surrounded her marriage to Michael. The evening seemed to be unfolding exactly as she had dreamed it would, with every element contributing to a perfect celebration of their commitment and love. When the time came for Rachel to deliver her speech, she felt nervous but excited about the opportunity to publicly express her gratitude to everyone who had made their wedding day so special, and to share her hopes and dreams for her marriage to Michael. She had spent weeks crafting her remarks, wanting to strike the perfect balance between heartfelt emotion and gracious appreciation for all the love and support they had received from family and friends. Her speech was meant to be a celebration of their journey together and a promise of the dedication and love she would bring to their marriage, reflecting her sincere belief that she and Michael were embarking on a beautiful adventure together. As Rachel approached the microphone, she felt a surge of love and gratitude for everyone present and for the man she had just married, completely unaware that her words were about to expose a cruel deception that would transform her wedding reception from a celebration into a revelation that would change her understanding of everything she thought she knew about her relationship, her husband, and the people she had trusted most in the world. Rachel's voice carried clearly through the reception hall as she began her carefully prepared speech, thanking her parents for their unwavering support throughout her life and education, expressing gratitude to Michael's family for welcoming her with open arms, and acknowledging the friends and colleagues who had traveled from near and far to celebrate this momentous occasion with them. Her words were genuine and heartfelt, flowing from a place of deep appreciation and love that reflected her sincere nature and the joy she felt about beginning this new chapter of her life with the man she believed was her perfect partner and soulmate. As Rachel continued speaking, she began to notice subtle changes in the audience's behavior that initially confused and then began to concern her, as scattered chuckles and knowing glances were exchanged among certain groups of guests, particularly Michael's business associates and several friends from his college years who seemed to be reacting to her words in ways that didn't match the tone and content of her heartfelt message. The laughter wasn't the warm, appreciative response she had expected to her expressions of gratitude and love, but rather something that felt mocking and exclusionary, as if there was an inside joke being shared at her expense that she couldn't understand or access. Michael's reaction to the growing murmurs and chuckles in the audience was particularly troubling to Rachel, as instead of appearing confused or concerned about the inappropriate responses to his wife's speech, he seemed to be suppressing his own amusement and exchanging meaningful looks with his friends that suggested he was somehow complicit in whatever was causing their entertainment. The realization that her husband might be participating in some form of mockery during her wedding speech created a cold knot of dread in Rachel's stomach, even as she continued speaking and tried to maintain her composure and dignity in front of their assembled guests. You know, there's something particularly devastating about realizing that you're being laughed at during what should be one of the most sacred and meaningful moments of your life. Have you ever felt that sinking sensation when you discover that everyone around you knows something you don't, and that something is being used to humiliate you? The confusion and hurt that Rachel was experiencing in that moment represents one of the deepest fears we all carry about being vulnerable and sincere in front of others, only to discover that our authenticity has been turned into entertainment for people who should be celebrating and supporting us. Rachel's speech continued with her planned expressions of love and commitment to Michael, describing their relationship journey and the qualities she admired most about him, including his ambition, his social confidence, and his ability to make her laugh during difficult times at the hospital, where her work as a nurse practitioner often involved life-and-death situations that required emotional resilience and strength. As she spoke about Michael's character and their shared dreams for the future, the inappropriate laughter and whispered comments from certain sections of the audience became more pronounced and obvious, creating an atmosphere of tension and discomfort that began to affect other guests who were confused about what was happening and why Rachel's beautiful speech was being met with such disrespectful behavior. The turning point came when Rachel decided to deviate from her prepared remarks and speak spontaneously about a specific memory that she treasured from their relationship. A quiet evening when Michael had comforted her after she had lost a patient at the hospital and was struggling with feelings of inadequacy and grief about her inability to save everyone who came under her care. As she shared this intimate moment and expressed gratitude for Michael's emotional support during one of her most vulnerable periods, the laughter from his friends became more audible and cruel, with some individuals actually pointing and making gestures that left no doubt they were mocking her words and emotions. Rachel's growing awareness that something was seriously wrong reached a crisis point when she noticed her maid of honor, Jessica, looking at her with a mixture of pity and discomfort that suggested she knew something about the situation that Rachel didn't understand. Jessica had been Rachel's closest friend since nursing school, and her expression of concern and embarrassment was completely at odds with the celebratory atmosphere that should have characterized this moment, creating additional confusion and anxiety for Rachel as she tried to process what was happening while maintaining her composure and completing her speech. The moment of revelation began when Rachel noticed that several of Michael's friends were holding their phones in ways that suggested they might be recording her speech, not for the sentimental reasons that would be appropriate at a wedding, but with expressions of anticipation and amusement that indicated they were capturing her words for purposes that had nothing to do with preserving beautiful wedding memories. The realization that her heartfelt expressions of love and vulnerability might be entertainment content for people who were supposed to be celebrating her marriage created a surge of anger and determination that would change the course of the entire evening. My dear friends, I can feel your hearts breaking for Rachel right now, just as mine did when I first heard this story. There's something so raw and relatable about that moment when you realize you've been set up to be the punchline of someone else's joke, especially when it involves the person you've chosen to spend your life with. If this story is touching something deep inside you, if you're remembering your own moments of betrayal or public humiliation, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Because your support means everything to me and helps me continue bringing you these powerful stories of real people facing impossible situations. I also want to hear from you in the comments about your own experiences with discovering that people you trusted were working against you. What other stories of betrayal and triumph would you like me to share? Your engagement and suggestions help me know what matters most to this incredible community we're building together. And trust me, what Rachel does next will restore your faith in the power of truth and courage to overcome even the cruelest deceptions. Rachel's decision to abandon her prepared speech and confront the situation directly came from a place of deep inner strength that she hadn't known she possessed until this moment of crisis forced her to choose between retreating in humiliation or standing up for herself in front of everyone who mattered most in her life. The silence that followed her pause was deafening, as guests began to sense that something significant was about to happen, and the atmosphere in the reception hall shifted from confused amusement to tense anticipation of whatever Rachel was going to say or do next. Instead of continuing with her planned remarks about love and gratitude, Rachel looked directly at Michael and asked him a question that would expose everything he had been hiding from her and reveal the true nature of the man she had just married in front of their family and friends. Her voice was steady, but carried an undertone of steel that surprised even her, as she asked Michael to explain why his friends found her expressions of love and commitment so entertaining, and why he seemed to be complicit in their mockery of what should have been a sacred and meaningful moment between husband and wife. Michael's reaction to being called out publicly was immediate and telling, as his confident demeanor crumbled and was replaced by panic and defensive anger that revealed aspects of his personality that Rachel had never seen before, despite their 4 years together. His attempt to deflect her question and minimize the situation only served to confirm Rachel's growing suspicions that something much deeper and more disturbing was happening than simple wedding day high spirits or inappropriate humor from his friends and colleagues. The crowd of wedding guests watched in stunned silence as the confrontation between bride and groom unfolded, with many people clearly uncomfortable about witnessing such a private and painful moment, while others seemed fascinated by the drama that was replacing the traditional celebration they had expected to enjoy. Rachel's family members looked confused and concerned, while Michael's friends appeared nervous about the direction the conversation was taking and the possibility that their involvement in whatever was happening might be exposed to the assembled guests. Rachel's demand for truth and transparency in that moment represented a turning point not only in her relationship with Michael, but also in her understanding of her own strength and worth as a person who deserved honesty and respect from the people closest to her. The courage required to confront deception and demand accountability in such a public setting, especially during what should have been one of the happiest days of her life, demonstrated a level of integrity and self-respect that would ultimately serve her well in the challenges that lay ahead. The breakthrough came when Jessica, Rachel's maid of honor, could no longer bear to watch her friend being humiliated and made the difficult decision to reveal what she had recently discovered about Michael's true character and the cruel game he had been playing at Rachel's expense. Jessica's voice shook with emotion and anger as she stood up from her seat at the head table and asked permission to share information that would change everything Rachel thought she knew about her marriage and the man she had just committed to spend her life with. Jessica's revelation began with an apology to Rachel for not speaking up sooner about what she had learned, explaining that she had discovered the truth only days before the wedding and had struggled with the decision about whether to destroy Rachel's happiness based on information that seemed almost too cruel and calculated to be believable. Her reluctance to interfere with Rachel's wedding plans had been motivated by love and a desire to protect her friend from unnecessary pain. But watching Rachel being mocked and humiliated during her own wedding speech had convinced Jessica that silence was no longer an option. The truth that Jessica revealed was more devastating than anyone in the reception hall could have imagined, as she explained that Michael had been sharing private details about Rachel's insecurities, work struggles, and intimate moments with his friends and colleagues for months, turning her vulnerabilities into entertainment and establishing a pattern of betrayal that extended far beyond the wedding day mockery. The intimate story that Rachel had just shared about Michael comforting her after losing a patient had been twisted and embellished by Michael in his retellings to his friends, who had been eagerly anticipating hearing Rachel repeat the story publicly so they could enjoy the irony of her gratitude for support that had been genuine in the moment but was later used to ridicule her behind her back. Michael's friends had been betting on whether Rachel would include specific personal details in her wedding speech, treating her most vulnerable moments as entertainment and wagering money on her expressions of love and commitment to a man who had been systematically violating her trust and privacy for their mutual amusement. The wedding reception had become the culmination of months of cruel manipulation, with Michael encouraging Rachel to be open and heartfelt in her speech, while knowing that her words would provide material for his friends to mock and ridicule her sincere emotions and genuine gratitude. The discovery that Michael had been recording some of their private conversations and sharing them with his friends added another layer of violation and betrayal that left Rachel reeling with the magnitude of the deception and cruelty she had been subjected to by the person she trusted most in the world. The realization that her most intimate moments, her professional struggles, and her personal insecurities had been turned into entertainment for Michael's social circle represented a level of betrayal that went far beyond simple marital problems or communication issues. Rachel's response to these revelations would demonstrate the strength of character that had made her successful as a nurse practitioner and a beloved friend to people like Jessica, who were willing to risk social discomfort to protect her from further harm. The choice she faced between private confrontation and public accountability would ultimately define not only the immediate future of her marriage, but also her own sense of self-worth and her ability to demand the respect and honesty she deserved from everyone in her life. The silence in the reception hall was broken only by the sound of Rachel's steady breathing as she processed the full implications of Jessica's revelations, her mind racing through months of memories and conversations that suddenly took on completely different meanings when viewed through the lens of Michael's systematic betrayal and manipulation. The faces of the wedding guests reflected a mixture of shock, discomfort, and fascination as they witnessed the real-time destruction of what should have been a celebration of love and commitment, but had instead become an exposure of deception and cruelty that would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. Michael's attempts to deny Jessica's accusations and discredit her motivations were undermined by the obvious guilt and panic written across his face, as well as the reactions of his friends who were clearly uncomfortable about having their participation in his cruel games exposed to the assembled guests. Several of his college friends began looking toward the exits as if considering whether to leave before the situation became even more uncomfortable. while others seemed frozen in place by the unfolding drama and their own complicity in the humiliation that Rachel had been subjected to without her knowledge or consent. Rachel's transformation from confused and hurt bride to empowered woman demanding accountability happened gradually as she began to connect the dots between Jessica's revelations and various incidents throughout her relationship with Michael that had previously seemed like minor misunderstandings or social awkwardness. The times when Michael's friends had made inside jokes that she didn't understand, the occasions when conversations stopped abruptly when she entered a room, and the subtle mockery she had sometimes sensed but dismissed as her own insecurity, suddenly formed a clear pattern of deliberate exclusion and ridicule orchestrated by the man she had just married. The moment when Rachel decided to take control of the situation and turn the tables on Michael and his friends marked a turning point that would be talked about and remembered by everyone present for years to come, as she demonstrated the kind of courage and dignity that transforms victims into heroes and shows the true power of authenticity and integrity when confronted with deception and cruelty. Her voice carried clearly through the reception hall as she addressed not only Michael, but also his friends who had participated in the systematic violation of her trust and privacy, making it clear that their entertainment had come at the expense of someone who had done nothing to deserve such treatment. Rachel's public confrontation with Michael included specific examples of the private moments and conversations that he had shared with his friends, demonstrating her awareness of the full scope of his betrayal, while also reclaiming ownership of her own story and experiences. The intimate details that Michael had twisted into entertainment for his social circle were reframed by Rachel as examples of her strength, vulnerability, and dedication to her work and relationships, transforming what had been used to mock her into evidence of her character and values that stood in stark contrast to the shallow cruelty of her husband and his associates. The reaction of the wedding guests to Rachel's powerful response varied dramatically depending on their relationship to the couple and their own values and character, with Rachel's family and friends rallying to support her with obvious pride and admiration for her courage, while Michael's associates seemed increasingly uncomfortable about their association with someone whose behavior had been so thoroughly exposed and condemned. The clear division in the room between those who supported Rachel and those who had participated in or enabled Michael's cruelty created a visual representation of the moral clarity that had emerged from the chaos and confusion of the evening. You know, watching Rachel find her voice and her power in that moment reminds me why I'm so passionate about sharing these stories with all of you. There's something absolutely magnificent about witnessing someone discover their own strength and refuse to be diminished by people who should have been lifting them up instead of tearing them down. If this story is resonating with your own experiences of being underestimated or betrayed by people you trusted, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share your own stories in the comments below. I want to hear about the moments when you found your courage and stood up for yourself, because those stories inspire and empower other people who might be facing similar challenges. What other topics or situations would you like me to explore in future videos? Your engagement and suggestions help me create content that truly matters to this amazing community we're building together. And trust me, Rachel's journey is far from over, and what happens next will leave you cheering for the power of truth and justice. The evidence of Michael's betrayal extended beyond the private conversations and personal details he had shared. As Rachel began to piece together a pattern of financial and professional manipulation that had been hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly stable relationship, the revelation that Michael had been using information about Rachel's work schedule and patient responsibilities to plan social events and business meetings that deliberately excluded her while creating opportunities for him to share embarrassing stories about her career challenges demonstrated a level of calculation and cruelty that went far beyond simple insensitivity or poor judgment. Rachel's discovery that Michael had been accessing her personal phone and email accounts to gather material for his entertainment and manipulation of their relationship represented a violation of privacy and trust that added legal implications to the emotional and psychological damage he had caused through his systematic betrayal. The realization that her most private thoughts, professional communications, and personal struggles had been monitored and exploited by someone she had trusted completely, created additional layers of trauma and violation that would require significant time and support to process and heal from completely. The immediate aftermath of Rachel's public exposure of Michael's behavior created chaos in the reception hall, as guests struggled to process what they had witnessed and decide how to respond to the dramatic revelation that had transformed a wedding celebration into a reckoning with truth and accountability that would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. The transformation of the reception hall from a place of celebration to a courtroom of public judgment was immediate and dramatic, as guests began choosing sides and expressing their opinions about the revelations that had just destroyed not only Rachel's marriage, but also exposed the character flaws and moral failures of everyone who had participated in Michael's cruel manipulation. The atmosphere became electric with tension and anticipation, as people realized they were witnessing a moment of truth that would have far-reaching consequences for all the relationships and reputations involved in the evening's dramatic revelations. Rachel's family members were the first to rally around her with visible support and protection, with her father standing up from his seat and moving toward the head table with an expression of barely controlled anger directed at Michael and anyone else who had participated in the systematic humiliation of his daughter. Rachel's mother's face reflected a mixture of pride in her daughter's courage and fury at the deception that had been perpetrated against someone she had raised to be trusting, honest, and vulnerable in her relationships with others. The protective instincts of Rachel's family created a powerful visual statement about the kind of love and support that should characterize healthy relationships, standing in stark contrast to the manipulation and betrayal that had defined Rachel's experience with Michael. Michael's parents appeared stunned and embarrassed by the public exposure of their son's behavior, struggling to process the revelation that the young man they had raised and supported had been capable of such calculated cruelty towards someone who had loved and trusted him completely. The disappointment and shame visible on their faces suggested that Michael's capacity for manipulation and betrayal came as a shock to them as well, indicating that his cruel behavior toward Rachel represented a side of his personality that he had successfully hidden from his own family as well as from his wife until this moment of dramatic exposure. The division among the wedding guests became more pronounced as people began leaving their seats and either moving toward Rachel to offer support or distancing themselves from Michael and his friends to avoid association with the exposed cruelty and manipulation. Several of Michael's business colleagues made quick exits from the reception, clearly concerned about the professional implications of being associated with someone whose character had been so thoroughly revealed and condemned in such a public setting. The social dynamics of the evening had been completely upended, with alliances and relationships being redefined in real time based on people's responses to the moral crisis that had replaced the wedding celebration. Jessica's role as the messenger who had finally revealed the truth about Michael's behavior placed her in a complex position, as she had to navigate the guilt of not speaking up sooner, while also dealing with the social consequences of being the person who had destroyed her best friend's wedding day by exposing necessary but devastating truths. Her decision to prioritize Rachel's long-term well-being over short-term social comfort demonstrated the kind of friendship and loyalty that stands in stark contrast to the self-serving behavior that had characterized Michael's treatment of his wife and her trust. The evidence that began emerging as other guests came forward with their own observations and experiences painted an even more disturbing picture of Michael's behavior and the culture of cruelty that he had cultivated among his social circle. Several women who had interacted with Michael in professional settings shared stories of inappropriate comments and boundary violations that they had previously dismissed as harmless flirtation, but now recognized as part of a pattern of disrespect and manipulation that extended far beyond his treatment of Rachel. Rachel's response to the additional revelations about Michael's character demonstrated her growing strength and clarity as she processed the full scope of the deception that had defined their relationship and began to understand that the man she had married was fundamentally different from the person she had believed him to be. Her ability to maintain her dignity and composure while learning about betrayals that extended far beyond what she had initially discovered showed a resilience and inner strength that impressed everyone present, and began to shift the focus from her humiliation to her admirable character and courage. The legal implications of Michael's behavior began to emerge as discussions about privacy violations, potential harassment, and the recorded conversations created awareness that the evening's revelations might have consequences that extended far beyond the immediate social and emotional damage. Several guests with legal backgrounds began quietly advising Rachel about her options for protecting herself and seeking accountability for the violations of privacy and trust that had been systematically perpetrated against her without her knowledge or consent. The financial aspects of the situation became apparent as Rachel began to consider the practical implications of the marriage dissolution that seemed inevitable, given the scope of Michael's betrayal and manipulation. The wedding expenses, joint financial accounts, and shared assets that had seemed like symbols of their partnership and commitment suddenly became sources of additional stress and complexity that would require careful navigation to ensure that Rachel's interests were protected throughout the process of extricating herself from a relationship built on deception. The transformation of Rachel from victim to empowered advocate for herself and potentially other women who might have been targeted by Michael's manipulation represented a powerful example of how truth and courage can emerge from even the most devastating betrayals and create opportunities for growth, healing, and positive change. Her decision to use the public platform of her wedding reception to expose Michael's behavior and demand accountability sent a clear message about the consequences of violating trust and treating others as entertainment for personal amusement. The ripple effects of the evening's revelations began to extend beyond the immediate wedding party, as news of the dramatic confrontation spread through social media and professional networks, creating consequences for Michael's career and reputation that would far exceed the immediate social embarrassment of being publicly exposed for his cruel and manipulative behavior toward his wife and others. The immediate aftermath of Rachel's powerful confrontation saw the reception hall transforming into something resembling a support group meeting, as guests who had been scattered throughout the venue began clustering around Rachel to offer comfort, share their own experiences with betrayal, and express admiration for her courage in exposing Michael's systematic deception and cruelty. The energy in the room had shifted completely from celebration to solidarity, with people who had never met before bonding over their shared outrage at the treatment Rachel had endured and their respect for her refusal to accept humiliation in silence. Several of the female guests came forward with their own stories about uncomfortable interactions with Michael that they had previously dismissed or rationalized, creating a fuller picture of his behavior patterns that extended far beyond his treatment of Rachel and revealed a consistent approach to manipulating and exploiting women in various contexts. A colleague from his workplace described feeling uncomfortable during team meetings where Michael would make inappropriate comments about female clients and co-workers, while a friend's wife shared an incident where Michael had made unwelcome advances at a previous social gathering, behavior that now took on more sinister implications given the emerging pattern of disrespect and boundary violations. Rachel's ability to process these additional revelations while maintaining her composure and continuing to advocate for herself demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence and strength that impressed everyone present, and began to transform her from a victim of cruel manipulation into a leader and role model for others who might be facing similar challenges. Her questions to the women sharing their experiences were thoughtful and supportive, creating a safe space for truth-telling that allowed multiple people to process their own encounters with Michael's inappropriate behavior and understand that they were not alone in experiencing discomfort with his treatment of women. The men in Michael's social circle found themselves in increasingly uncomfortable positions as the scope of his behavior became clear, and they were forced to confront their own complicity in enabling or ignoring the red flags that had been present in his treatment of women throughout their friendship. Some of his friends began distancing themselves from him immediately, while others seemed defensive about their association with someone whose character had been so thoroughly exposed and condemned in such a public setting. Michael's attempts to regain control of the narrative and minimize the significance of his behavior were met with increasingly hostile responses from the assembled guests, who had moved far beyond patience with his excuses and deflections to active anger about the systematic nature of his manipulation and betrayal. His claims that his sharing of private information had been harmless entertainment among friends were undermined by the obvious pain and violation that Rachel and other women had experienced as a result of his actions, making it clear that his behavior had real victims and serious consequences that extended far beyond his own amusement. The documentation of Michael's behavior that began emerging as guests shared screenshots, recordings, and written evidence painted a disturbing picture of someone who had been systematically collecting and exploiting private information about multiple women for entertainment and control. The group chat messages that several people produced showed Michael sharing intimate details about Rachel's insecurities and professional challenges, often embellishing or distorting the truth to make her appear more foolish or vulnerable than she actually was, demonstrating a level of malice and calculation that went far beyond simple insensitivity. Rachel's decision to take possession of the evidence being shared by guests and begin documenting the full scope of Michael's behavior showed her transformation from shocked victim to empowered advocate who was committed to ensuring that there would be consequences for his actions and protection for other potential victims. Her systematic approach to gathering information and testimonies demonstrated the organizational skills and attention to detail that made her successful as a nurse practitioner, applied now to the task of holding her husband accountable for his violations of trust and privacy. The revelation that Michael had been planning to monetize his documentation of Rachel's vulnerabilities through a social media presence or potential book deal added another layer of exploitation and betrayal that left even his supporters struggling to defend his behavior. The discovery of notebooks and digital files containing detailed observations about Rachel's work stress, family relationships, and personal insecurities, organized with apparent plans for public consumption, revealed a level of premeditation and malice that transformed what might have been dismissed as poor judgment into evidence of systematic psychological abuse. The legal professionals among the wedding guests began providing Rachel with preliminary advice about her options for protecting herself legally and seeking accountability for the privacy violations, harassment, and potential defamation that Michael's behavior had involved. The consensus among these advisors was that Michael's actions had crossed multiple legal boundaries and created liability that could result in significant consequences for his career, finances, and reputation far beyond the immediate social fallout from the wedding reception confrontation. Rachel's family members coordinated among themselves to ensure that she would have comprehensive support throughout the process of extricating herself from the marriage and dealing with the legal, financial, and emotional consequences of Michael's betrayal. Her parents, siblings, and extended family formed a protective network that would provide practical assistance with housing, legal representation, and emotional support during what they recognized would be a challenging period of rebuilding her life and processing the trauma of discovering that her marriage had been built on systematic deception and manipulation. The transformation of the wedding reception into an impromptu intervention and support gathering demonstrated the power of truth to create unexpected alliances and reveal the character of everyone involved in the situation. The guests who rallied around Rachel and shared their own experiences created a temporary community united by their commitment to justice and accountability, while those who defended or enabled Michael's behavior found themselves increasingly isolated and uncomfortable as the evening progressed. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone found the courage to speak truth to power and expose behavior that everyone knew was wrong, but no one had been willing to confront? The energy in that reception hall must have been incredible as people realized they were witnessing someone refuse to be diminished by cruelty and instead transform her pain into power that could protect others from similar treatment. The exodus of Michael's closest friends and supporters began in earnest as the weight of evidence against him became undeniable, and their association with his behavior became increasingly indefensible to the other wedding guests who were witnessing their reactions to the revelations about systematic manipulation and cruelty. The men who had participated in mocking Rachel's vulnerabilities found themselves facing hostile stares and uncomfortable questions about their own character and values, with several choosing to leave rather than face further scrutiny about their complicity in Michael's campaign of psychological abuse against his wife. Rachel's transformation into a powerful advocate for herself and others, continued as she began addressing the remaining guests directly, sharing her own perspective on the relationship dynamics that had allowed Michael's behavior to continue unchecked for so long and encouraging other women present to trust their instincts about uncomfortable situations rather than dismissing their concerns as oversensitivity or paranoia. Her impromptu speech about recognizing and responding to manipulation and gaslighting provided practical guidance that many guests found valuable and empowering, transforming the evening from a personal crisis into an educational opportunity that could benefit everyone present. The evidence collection process became more systematic as Rachel worked with the legal professionals among the guests to ensure that all documentation of Michael's behavior was properly preserved and organized for potential future proceedings. The text messages, social media posts, recorded conversations, and witness testimonies were carefully cataloged and copied, creating a comprehensive record of the pattern of abuse and violation that had characterized Michael's treatment of Rachel and potentially other women in his social and professional circles. Michael's isolation became more complete as even his own family members began questioning their support for his behavior and expressing concern about the legal and professional consequences that seemed likely to result from the evening's revelations. His parents approached Rachel privately to express their shock and disappointment about their son's actions, and to offer whatever assistance they could provide in helping her navigate the aftermath of the marriage dissolution and protect herself from further harm or retaliation. The practical considerations of Rachel's immediate safety and housing became a priority as guests recognized that returning to the home she shared with Michael might not be safe or comfortable given the level of betrayal and manipulation that had been exposed. Several family members and friends offered alternative accommodations, while others began coordinating the logistics of retrieving Rachel's personal belongings and ensuring that she would have access to her financial resources and important documents without having to rely on Michael's cooperation. The professional consequences for Michael began materializing even before the reception ended, as several of his business colleagues who had witnessed the evening's events began discussing the implications for his employment and professional relationships. The revelation that he had been systematically violating women's privacy and trust raised serious questions about his suitability for positions that required integrity and trustworthiness, particularly in client-facing roles where his behavior patterns could create liability for his employers. Rachel's decision to use her nursing background and crisis management skills to coordinate support for other women who had come forward with their own experiences of Michael's inappropriate behavior demonstrated her natural leadership abilities and commitment to protecting others from similar harm. She organized informal counseling sessions and resource sharing among the women present, creating connections and support networks that would extend far beyond the immediate crisis and provide lasting benefits for everyone involved. The social media implications of the evening's events became apparent as guests began sharing their experiences and perspectives about the dramatic confrontation, creating a viral story that would reach far beyond the immediate wedding party and have lasting consequences for Michael's reputation and career prospects. The hashtags and posts that emerged from the event created a public record of the evening's revelations and established a digital trail that would make it difficult for Michael to rebuild his image or escape accountability for his behavior. The financial planning aspects of Rachel's situation required immediate attention as she began working with trusted advisors to protect her assets and financial accounts from potential retaliation or manipulation by Michael, who had demonstrated through his behavior that he was willing to exploit any vulnerability for his own advantage. The discovery that Michael had been monitoring her financial transactions and using information about her spending patterns as material for his cruel entertainment with his friends added another layer of violation that required immediate protective action to prevent further abuse. The wedding venue staff found themselves in an unprecedented situation as they witnessed the complete transformation of what should have been a joyful celebration into a crisis intervention and evidence-gathering session that would require sensitive handling to ensure everyone's safety and privacy. The venue coordinator worked discreetly with Rachel's family to modify the evening's logistics and provide private spaces for the difficult conversations and planning sessions that were taking place as guests coordinated support and protection for Rachel while she processed the full scope of her husband's betrayal. The psychological impact of discovering that her entire marriage had been built on systematic deception and manipulation began to manifest as Rachel experienced waves of different emotions ranging from anger and betrayal to relief and empowerment, as she realized that the problems she had attributed to her own inadequacy were actually the result of Michael's deliberate sabotage of her confidence and well-being. The validation from other women who shared similar experiences helped Rachel understand that she was not responsible for Michael's behavior and that her instincts about feeling uncomfortable or confused in certain situations had been accurate rather than paranoid. The documentation process revealed that Michael's behavior had escalated over time, with early incidents involving minor boundary violations and inappropriate comments gradually developing into systematic privacy violations and organized humiliation campaigns that had involved multiple collaborators and increasingly sophisticated methods of gathering and exploiting personal information. The pattern suggested that Michael's treatment of Rachel represented a progression of abusive behavior that might have continued to escalate if it had not been exposed and confronted during the wedding reception. Rachel's medical training and experience with crisis situations proved invaluable as she helped coordinate care and support for other women who were processing their own experiences with Michael's inappropriate behavior, using her professional skills to assess their emotional needs and connect them with appropriate resources and support systems. Her ability to remain calm and focused while dealing with her own trauma demonstrated the strength and resilience that had made her successful in healthcare and would serve her well in rebuilding her life after extricating herself from the toxic relationship. The investigation into Michael's behavior expanded as more evidence emerged from digital sources that revealed the full scope of his systematic documentation and exploitation of women's private information, including sophisticated recording equipment that he had hidden in their shared home and detailed spreadsheets tracking Rachel's emotional cycles, work stress levels, and vulnerable moments that he had then used to manipulate her reactions and exploit her weaknesses for his entertainment and control. The criminal implications of Michael's behavior became apparent as legal professionals identified multiple potential charges, including invasion of privacy, harassment, emotional abuse, and possibly stalking, depending on the jurisdiction and specific evidence that could be gathered and verified through official investigative channels. The presence of recording devices in their home raised questions about consent and wiretapping laws that could result in serious legal consequences that would extend far beyond civil litigation or divorce proceedings. Rachel's decision to pursue full legal accountability for Michael's behavior sent a powerful message to other potential victims and to the broader community about the importance of holding manipulative and abusive individuals responsible for their actions rather than allowing them to escape consequences through charm, social connections, or claims of misunderstanding. Her commitment to seeing the legal process through to completion demonstrated courage that inspired other women to come forward with their own experiences and testimonies that strengthened the case against Michael. The ripple effects of the evening's revelations began affecting Michael's professional relationships and business opportunities, as word spread through his industry about the systematic nature of his manipulation and privacy violations, creating concerns among potential clients and business partners about the liability and reputation risks associated with working with someone whose character had been so thoroughly exposed and documented. Several pending business deals and partnership opportunities were quietly withdrawn as companies distanced themselves from the controversy and potential legal complications. The support network that formed around Rachel during and after the reception became a lasting source of strength and connection that provided emotional, practical, and professional assistance throughout the challenging process of rebuilding her life and pursuing justice for the violations she had endured. The women who had shared their own experiences with Michael's inappropriate behavior formed an informal support group that met regularly to process their experiences and advocate for systemic changes that could prevent similar situations in the future. Rachel's transformation from victim to advocate accelerated as she began speaking publicly about the warning signs of manipulative behavior and the importance of trusting one's instincts when dealing with individuals who consistently make others feel uncomfortable or confused about their own perceptions and experiences. Her presentations to women's groups, professional organizations, and healthcare facilities provided practical guidance for recognizing and responding to psychological manipulation, while also raising awareness about the prevalence and serious consequences of these behavior patterns. The media attention that the story attracted created opportunities for Rachel to reach a broader audience with her message about the importance of accountability and support for victims of psychological abuse, while also putting additional pressure on Michael and others who had enabled his behavior to face consequences for their actions. The interviews and articles that featured Rachel's story helped educate the public about the subtle and sophisticated nature of emotional manipulation, while providing hope and inspiration for other individuals who might be experiencing similar treatment. The legal proceedings against Michael progressed steadily as prosecutors built a comprehensive case based on the extensive evidence that had been gathered during and after the wedding reception, including testimony from multiple witnesses, digital evidence of privacy violations, and documentation of the systematic pattern of abuse that had characterized his treatment of Rachel and other women. The strength of the evidence made it difficult for Michael to mount an effective defense or negotiate favorable plea arrangements. The financial costs of the legal battle were significant for both parties, but Rachel's decision to pursue justice, regardless of the expense, demonstrated her commitment to ensuring that Michael would face appropriate consequences for his behavior and that other potential victims would be protected from similar treatment. The crowdfunding campaign that supporters organized to help with Rachel's legal expenses raised substantial funds while also increasing public awareness about the case and the issues it represented. The trial proceedings that followed the wedding reception confrontation provided a public forum for Rachel and other victims to share their experiences with Michael's systematic manipulation and abuse, creating an official record of his behavior patterns that would serve as a warning to future potential victims and a source of validation for the women who had suffered under his psychological warfare tactics. The courtroom testimony revealed the full extent of Michael's calculated cruelty and the sophisticated methods he had used to document and exploit his victims' vulnerabilities for entertainment and control. Michael's defense strategy of claiming that his behavior had been harmless entertainment among friends was thoroughly undermined by the testimony of the women who described the real emotional and psychological damage they had suffered as a result of his privacy violations and systematic humiliation campaigns. The expert witnesses who testified about the long-term effects of psychological abuse helped the court understand that Michael's actions had caused genuine harm that extended far beyond temporary embarrassment or social discomfort. The sentencing phase of the legal proceedings resulted in significant consequences for Michael, including jail time, substantial financial penalties, mandatory counseling and monitoring, and restrictions on his ability to access social media or recording technology that could be used to violate others' privacy in the future. The comprehensive nature of the sentence reflected the court's recognition that Michael's behavior represented a serious pattern of abuse that required both punishment and prevention measures to protect potential future victims. Rachel's victim impact statement during the sentencing hearing provided a powerful summary of the healing journey she had undertaken since discovering the truth about her marriage and the man she had trusted with her most intimate thoughts and vulnerabilities. Her description of the process of rebuilding her sense of self-worth and learning to trust her own perceptions again resonated with other abuse survivors and provided hope that recovery and empowerment were possible even after experiencing severe psychological manipulation and betrayal. The professional consequences for Michael extended beyond the criminal proceedings as professional licensing boards and industry organizations conducted their own investigations and imposed sanctions that effectively ended his career in his chosen field and created barriers to obtaining employment in positions that required trust or access to sensitive information. The professional accountability measures demonstrated that psychological abuse and privacy violations would not be tolerated in workplace environments, and that employers had responsibilities to protect their staff and clients from individuals with documented patterns of manipulative behavior. The educational initiatives that Rachel launched in the aftermath of her experience included workshops for healthcare professionals about recognizing and responding to psychological abuse, presentations for women's organizations about trusting their instincts and seeking support when needed, and advocacy for policy changes that would strengthen legal protections against privacy violations and emotional manipulation. Her work in this area transformed her personal trauma into a source of positive change that benefited countless other individuals. The documentary that was eventually produced about Rachel's story and the legal proceedings that followed provided a comprehensive examination of psychological abuse patterns and the systemic factors that enable manipulative individuals to continue their behavior without consequences for extended periods. The film's impact extended internationally and contributed to policy discussions about strengthening legal frameworks for addressing emotional abuse and protecting victims' rights throughout the justice process. Rachel's personal healing journey included therapy to process the complex trauma of discovering that her reality had been systematically distorted by someone she trusted, rebuilding her ability to form healthy relationships based on genuine mutual respect and honesty, and developing new professional interests that incorporated her experiences with crisis management and victim advocacy. The process was challenging, but ultimately led to a stronger sense of self and clearer understanding of her own values and boundaries. The ongoing support group that formed among the women who had been affected by Michael's behavior continued to meet regularly for several years, providing a safe space for processing their experiences, celebrating their healing progress, and supporting each other through the various challenges that arose during their recovery journeys. The bonds formed through shared trauma and mutual support created lasting friendships that enriched all their lives and demonstrated the positive connections that could emerge from even the most difficult circumstances. The anniversary of the wedding reception confrontation became an annual occasion for Rachel to reflect on her growth and transformation, while also honoring the courage it had taken to speak truth in that moment and demand accountability from someone who had systematically violated her trust and dignity. The date served as a reminder of her own strength and resilience, while also marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life built on authenticity, self-respect, and healthy relationships with people who shared her values and commitment to treating others with genuine care and respect. 5 years after the wedding reception that changed everything, Rachel had built a completely new life centered around her work as a patient advocate and abuse prevention educator, using her nursing background and personal experience to help other individuals navigate healthcare systems while dealing with the additional complications of psychological trauma and domestic abuse situations. Her professional reputation had grown nationally as healthcare institutions sought her expertise in developing protocols for identifying and supporting patients who might be experiencing manipulation or abuse in their personal relationships. The speaking engagements and consulting work that emerged from Rachel's advocacy efforts had created financial independence and professional fulfillment that far exceeded anything she had experienced during her marriage to Michael, demonstrating that her talents and capabilities had been suppressed rather than supported by the relationship she had worked so hard to maintain and improve. The contrast between her current success and her previous struggles highlighted the extent to which Michael's systematic undermining had affected her confidence and professional performance without her realizing the source of the problems. Rachel's personal relationships had also transformed dramatically as she applied the lessons learned from her experience with manipulation to building friendships and eventually a romantic partnership based on transparency, mutual respect, and genuine support for each other's goals and well-being. The man she eventually married was someone who celebrated her strength and independence rather than trying to exploit or diminish it, creating a relationship dynamic that felt completely different from the constant confusion and self-doubt that had characterized her marriage to Michael. The policy changes that Rachel's advocacy work had helped implement included stronger legal protections for victims of psychological abuse, improved training for law enforcement and legal professionals about recognizing and responding to emotional manipulation cases, and educational programs in schools and workplaces about healthy relationship dynamics and the warning signs of manipulative behavior. The systemic changes represented lasting impact that would protect countless future victims from experiencing the kind of sophisticated abuse that Rachel had endured. Michael's life had taken a very different trajectory, with the criminal conviction and professional sanctions creating ongoing barriers to employment and social relationships that effectively isolated him from the opportunities and connections he had previously used to identify and exploit vulnerable individuals. The monitoring and counseling requirements imposed by the court had forced him to confront his behavior patterns and their consequences, though the reports suggested that his progress in developing genuine empathy and respect for others remained limited. The women who had formed the support group during Rachel's crisis had maintained their connections and had gone on to create their own positive impacts in their communities, with several becoming advocates themselves and others using their experiences to strengthen their own relationships and support networks. The ripple effects of their collective healing and empowerment had extended far beyond their original group, creating a network of informed and supportive individuals who were better equipped to recognize and respond to manipulation in their own lives and communities. The research studies that had emerged from academic interest in Rachel's case had contributed to the growing body of knowledge about psychological abuse patterns and recovery processes, providing evidence-based insights that informed therapeutic approaches and legal frameworks for addressing these complex situations. The scholarly attention had also helped legitimize the experiences of psychological abuse victims and establish that emotional manipulation could cause genuine trauma that required professional treatment and legal protection. Rachel's book about her experience and recovery journey had become a resource for other abuse survivors and the professionals who worked with them, providing practical guidance about the healing process while also sharing hope that transformation and empowerment were possible even after experiencing severe betrayal and systematic manipulation. The international translation of the book had extended its impact globally and connected Rachel with advocates and survivors from many different cultural contexts who shared similar challenges and goals. The wedding venue where Rachel's confrontation with Michael had taken place had implemented new policies and training programs for their staff about recognizing and responding to crisis situations, domestic abuse disclosures, and other emergency circumstances that might arise during events. The venue's commitment to creating safer spaces for their clients had been inspired directly by witnessing Rachel's courage and the importance of having supportive bystanders when individuals find the strength to speak truth about their experiences. As Rachel looked toward the future, she felt profound gratitude for the painful awakening that had ultimately freed her from a relationship built on deception and led her to discover her own strength, purpose, and capacity for creating positive change in the world. The journey from victim to survivor to advocate had been challenging, but had ultimately revealed talents and passions that she might never have discovered if she had remained trapped in the cycle of manipulation and self-doubt that had characterized her marriage to Michael. The legacy of that dramatic wedding reception had become a story of transformation and hope that continued to inspire other individuals facing similar challenges to trust their instincts, seek support, and believe in their own worth and capacity for building healthier, more authentic relationships and lives. Rachel's example demonstrated that even the most devastating betrayals could become sources of wisdom and strength that created positive impact far beyond the original trauma and pain. The final reflection that Rachel often shared in her presentations was that while she would never have chosen to experience the pain of discovering her husband's systematic betrayal, the journey that followed had led her to a life of greater purpose, stronger relationships, and deeper self-knowledge than she had ever imagined possible. The transformation from confusion and self-doubt to clarity and empowerment represented not just personal healing, but also hope for anyone who might be struggling to understand their own experiences with manipulation and abuse. My beautiful friends, thank you for staying with me through Rachel's incredible journey from betrayal to empowerment. Her story reminds us that sometimes our most painful experiences can become our greatest sources of strength and wisdom, and that speaking truth in difficult moments can create ripple effects of positive change that extend far beyond our own lives. If this story has touched your heart or reminded you of your own experiences with finding courage in impossible situations, please stay connected with our community by clicking on one of the videos appearing on your screen right now to continue exploring these powerful themes of resilience, truth, and the amazing strength we all carry within us.